a sense of community when you're free. Rolling through the mountains, rolling through the valley, rolling through paradise with me.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Small Talk. Now, my guest has been here with me once before, and I'm very pleased to welcome back Dr. Tim Cooper.
Thank you, Nancy. It's a pleasure to be back.
Thank you so much, because one of the things that you have been talking about for years is the environment, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there was a time when people weren't really listening. Is that my understanding?
Well, that's certainly true. And there's a significant fraction that are still not really listening. It's not the environment in general. I wouldn't consider myself qualified to be an environmentalist,
Okay.
But specifically on climate, that's my
Right. Oh, yes.
niche.
Sorry, I should. Yeah, I'm glad you clarified that. Yeah, because one of the things that I've read, and you might be able to confirm it, is Canada's not doing so well as far as what it said. Like the government said they were going to do it. Lower emissions or whatever it was by whatever percent, and I heard that we're the 8th worst in the world.
Oh, that would be encouraging. The information I have ranks the top 10 emitters in the world according to emissions per capita.
Okay.
And that includes both methane and carbon dioxide. On that scale, we're number 1 in terms of the worst.
Oh my gosh.
So that's on a per capita basis.
Right.
So if you compare us to, say, China,
yeah,
they actually emit more.
Right.
But that's an unfair comparison.
Yeah, because there's such a large population.
Right,
yeah, for sure. But what do you think is why do you think some people are just not into it or not wanting to listen?
That's a great question. If I knew the answer to that, my job of going around giving presentations would be a lot easier. I call it my job. It's actually my hobby.
Right.
I can say that the number of people who outright deny the science is decreasing. And I think those massive floods over the summer and the smoke that we're now getting every single year is convincing people. There's still a few holdouts that say, well, that's just weather, that just happened here, not taking into account that it's happening in every single country around the world at the same time. So it truly is global, and hence the label global warming applies.
Yeah, and you know what, like in this area anyway, Fraser Valley had the longest drought for, I think, was it since written history or something like that? Or am I wrong?
Oh, that'd be a question for Roger Pannett. I don't know, but I do know we're seeing more droughts year after year after year, and it will continue to get worse. We know that much too.
Right.
Whether it was actually the worst on record, I'm not sure. However, I can say that this summer past will look quite mild compared to what we're going to be seeing 20 years down the road or 30 years down the road. Yeah,
for sure, because we can't fix what's gone past. And if we don't make it drastic improvements, like I don't understand, like when they say by year 2050 or whatever they're gonna we can't wait that long for any changes, can we?
Actually, no. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which is the world's top climate scientists getting together and doing all their calculations as best they can, and see whatever they agree upon ends up in their report.
Right.
If they don't agree on something, often it doesn't make the report. And the report is usually dumbed down a little bit, or toned down a little bit, because politicians are objecting to what they're saying. But what they said in 2018, that's not the most recent report. The most recent one's 2022, but it says basically the same thing. So I'm going to go with the 2018 one, is that we can emit 420 more gigatons of carbon dioxide before we get to a point where the climate has caused the world to warm about 1.5 degrees Celsius, and from then it will just run away. Now, that number means nothing to anybody until you know that we're actually emitting 42 gigatons every year as a species. So we can keep on emitting steadily for 10 years. This is what, and then cut completely all fossil fuel use. That's one option that the IPCC have presented. But most people agree that just simply going from using a whole lot of fossil fuels to using absolutely none overnight would be disruptive, to say the least. So they said just reduce it by 45% by 2030, and then drop it down to 0 by 2050. That was their recommendation. Well, that was 2018. Here we are in 2022. How did they really drop it down? No, they did not. They, who's they? We, the human race. We're emitting every bit as much now as we did in 2018. So instead of following the path, let me see if I can do this with my hands on your screen. Instead of dropping off gently like this, we've been maintaining high. So
Yeah.
to get down to a point where we emit less than or equal to 420 gigatons total, we've now got to cut deeper and harder. So
Right,
going to
right.
45% by 2030 won't do it.
Right,
And going to net zero in 2050 won't do it either.
right.
It's,
You know, I try to remind people, like, this is our planet. It
Mhm.
doesn't belong to the government.
Mhm.
It doesn't belong to big business. It belongs to all of us.
Mhm.
And it's the only one we have. I
Mhm.
know they're trying to, find out if they can sustain life on Mars or whatever it is. But in the meantime, and even if they could, that's going to be like way after our lifetimes, I think, right? We have to do something now. Like one of the things I just read, is it called the Coquitlam iceberg?
oh,
Last one of BC's iceberg is melting a lot faster than they predicted.
oh, I haven't heard about that.
Oh, I
Okay.
think, I can't remember if I read it, I
Mhm.
heard it on CBC or something like that,
Okay.
but that's, again, that's the problem, we don't hear about.
Yeah, would
Those
that be a
things now.
glacier or an iceberg? Because we don't normally get icebergs here.
Oh, it must have been a glacier.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, my mistake, yeah. But apparently it's like the last
Mhm.
major one or something like that. And it's like, if that doesn't concern people, what does?
Mhm.
I watch a lot of these living below zero shows where a lot of the First Nations people
Mhm.
live, and they fish and they hunt, and they were just talking about how the fish are less and less all the time. Not just from climate can change, I understand that. But because it's also, everybody in the world is fishing, and when you get those great big trawlers and it's just sucking them up like with a
I know.
vacuum cleaner,
Yeah.
right? It's going to cause drastic changes, right? So everybody's, like, we here,
Mhm.
I think our life hasn't changed enough yet.
Mhm.
And that's why.
Yeah, changing our lives is actually easier than most people might realize. So what actually drives people is the almighty dollar.
Yes.
We like to pretend that we're more noble than that, but really
Yeah.
we're not. So if I'm looking at what Canada is doing with our very high emissions per person, why are we doing that? Well, our homes are not very well insulated, so we have to burn natural gas to keep them warm. Our cars are massive. You want to go pick up a dozen eggs, why do you need a 350 cubic inch engine on your truck? You really don't. And how can we change without disrupting our lifestyle? Some people who should know better, but often are influenced by the fossil fuel industry's propaganda, will say, well, we don't want to freeze to death. We don't want to have to stay home and take bicycles everywhere. But that's just nonsense. That's just spreading misinformation. For example, Nancy, when I came here today, I drove my 2015 electric car. Ancient electric car by modern standards, super. I bought it 5 years ago. It's a 7-year-old car. Bought it 5 years ago. Since then, I've saved $10,000.
Right.
And I only paid $16,000 for it in the first place. It was secondhand. So electric vehicles actually are now cheaper to operate. There's a little study I did, and you'll find them all over the internet as well. If you were to buy, say, a Chevy Bolt for $42,000, which is a fully electric car, range of about 317 kilometers, or you could buy a Toyota Corolla. We will hopefully know what a Toyota Corolla is,
yes,
for a price of $25,000. It sounds like $42,000, $25,000, the Corolla's cheaper. But then over the lifetime of the electric car, you don't have to buy gas. And electricity works out to be about 5 to 10 times cheaper. So in the end, you come out $10,000 ahead buying the EV. Why would anyone in their right mind buy a gasoline-powered car? It's a mystery to me. It's all to do with marketing, I suspect.
I think it is, and I think a lot of misinformation going out there about electric cars. Because I put something on Facebook, and one of my family members said, "Oh, I heard there's a lot of problems." He thought I was talking about a vehicle, and I was talking about a mobility scooter. But anyway, he said, "Oh, I heard there's a lot of problems with those," and I said, "You're always going to hear stuff like that, but it doesn't mean it's true."
Perfectly said, yeah. The electric car does need to be maintained.
Yes, of course.
You take your gasoline-powered car in there, they're going to change the oil, change the transmission fluid, but they have to, at some point, switch out the gearbox or switch out the transmission because it wears out. The engine will wear out. There's a whole bunch of things can go wrong.
Right.
With an electric car, basically you maintain it like you do your vacuum cleaner at home. When was the last time you took your vacuum cleaner into the shop to get maintenance on it?
Yeah.
That's not completely true, because one thing about electric cars at the present time is the batteries are heavy.
Okay,
So that means the tires will wear out a little bit faster than they would a gasoline powered car.
right.
And that means you need to rotate the tires more often. So
But-
that's it. Just
yeah.
rotate the tires.
So one of the questions that comes up, and I don't know if you know, but what if something goes wrong on an electric car? Are there enough at this point mechanics that understand electric cars?
Yes, no problem. Well, at least I've not had any trouble.
Okay,
So
right.
I do remember thinking to myself how clever I am to have bought this electric car soon after I got it. And I was driving through a neighborhood and I said, geez, I think I'm going to write a letter to the editor and say, there's no maintenance, there's no repairs, it's fantastic. Boom, I ran straight over a nail. So getting that tire fixed was exactly the same as you would with any other car.
Yeah, for sure.
Serves me right for being so foolish. But no, I have a Nissan and I go to the Nissan dealer, they know all about it, no problem at all. And whichever car you get, chances are there's a dealer in town.
Right.
So,
Well, a lot of people said, oh, I prefer one of those hybrids that does either, you know, but I'm thinking, well, why bother?
well, now you've got twice as many things to go wrong.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, hadn't thought of that. I like I said, I purchased myself, I don't have it yet, that is a mobility scooter, because I can no longer drive, and so I gave my my car to my daughter. But I was just thinking about, you'll look at some homes, private homes, and you'll see maybe 3-4 cars parked in the driveway, you know, there's the mother, the father, maybe some of the older children that drive.
Yeah.
You know, and people don't want to take the time to share a vehicle. I understand if one person's going this way and one's going that way, it can be a little difficult. But are there neighbors that go to, are there employees that go the same way? You know, there are alternatives.
For sure, yeah. I'm part of a 2-car family, and our other car is actually a Toyota Corolla.
Right.
But we take it out once a month or something like that, because for all trips here in the valley, the Leaf is fine.
Yeah.
When we do want to go to Penticton or somewhere a bit further, we just take the gasoline powered car at that point. So we've saved over 90% of the gasoline
Right,
and a huge amount of money.
right. I want to live in a community where we're allowed to have golf carts.
Sounds good to me. Yeah. But it's not just your transportation.
No, of course not.
I just recently, I'm going to sound as if I'm a wonderful person here, but not in a cheapskate. Let me be clear on that. I just had a heat pump installed in my house.
Yeah.
Got rid of the old gas furnace. And by the time all the rebates were in, it cost me a net of about $3,000. But my gas furnace was on its last legs anyway.
Right.
That would have cost me something like 6 or 7 to replace.
Right.
So it's actually cheaper. And now that I'm heating with electricity, it's way cheaper than heating with gas, provided it's done with a heat pump.
For sure.
So all I'm doing is just saving money. I
When
don't know
I-
what to do with it, all right?
Yeah,
Yes.
When I lived in Ontario with my ex, this would be, I moved out here in 1995. We had a heat pump installed.
Mhm. Yeah.
And we trying to convince our neighbors, you know, not convince exactly, trying to explain to them that we're saving money. And a lot of people don't like changes.
Mhm.
It's as simple as that, you know?
Oh, yeah. And that's just that. The heat pumps that you could buy 10 years ago, they were quite different from the heat pumps you could buy
That's
today.
true, yeah.
By the time here in Chilliwack, the temperature got down to about 5 degrees. If you had a 10 or 11-year-old heat pump, the technician would have set it up so that it turns the heat pump off at 5 degrees Celsius and switches purely to the gas, because it takes a lot of electricity to operate a heat pump when it gets really cold outside. The new ones, well, the one in my house goes down to -18 without too much loss of efficiency. And you can buy Arctic heat pumps now that are good to -30.
Oh,
That's still air to air.
yeah, right.
So
Wow.
yeah, there's no excuse to
No,
have a system that emits carbon dioxide is putting the world in peril. Certainly the young kids are in peril, and it costs you more.
yeah, right.
Why would you do that? And yet people do.
And they do.
So
You know, unfortunately, because we live in a like, when we hear the building's heated with electricity.
Yeah.
I mean, well, we each have our own,
Mhm.
right? But we have a gas fireplace, and that's for like the backup or whatever. But thank goodness we do, though, because if we had electric boilers, electric heaters in the basement, you know, that would be really not cost effective for the whole building, right?
right, there's a difference between a heat pump, because with a heat pump
Yes, absolutely.
you get 3 times the heat for 1 unit of electricity, but with just a baseboard, it's
Yeah.
1 to 1. So
Yeah,
for
for sure, yeah. And again, we don't, like somebody says, oh, you know, you can look for rebates and all that, but buildings don't qualify for those, but a homeowner would
Yeah.
qualify. So you sort of fall through the cracks for some of the things. But I don't like well, I don't like heating in the winter because the air's dry to begin with, you know,
That's
I don't
true,
like
yeah.
either gas or electric, but to see your bill goes up, that's always hard, you know, when you don't have
Of
that in the
course, yeah.
summer. But now that we have such hot summers,
Mhm.
we have the reverse problem, you know, you have to have, you need air conditioning.
Mhm.
My place, as you can see, you can't tell people, but my place, where the light is shining, I should have adjusted it, but this is south facing,
Okay.
okay, and I get the sun all
Mm.
day pretty well. So in the summer, it could be like a furnace, you
Mhm.
know, and we have new windows installed, and that's supposed to have a little bit of a tint. But I know there's all kinds of things you can do if you're a single home.
Mhm.
And I would like to see new build, sorry, I was going to interrupt.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I was just going to mention, I have a friend in Victoria who's in exactly the same position as you. She's in a condo and she just can't control what goes on in the building. But she's just discovered that she can actually get a portable heat pump. You've heard of portable air conditioners that you have on wheels and you stick the pipe out the window and it sucks air in and pushes it out. Now you can get heat pumps that way. So naturally that'll work in summer and winter.
I'm gonna look into that for sure. Sorry about the lighting people, but it's, you know, it's a sunshiny day. What can I say? You know, this is our rainy season. So we always enjoy sun when it comes out at this time of the year. But thank you. I didn't know that. So that's another tip for everybody here, you know, that if just look into it, just look into it. That's all you need to do is and see the cost if you can afford it. I don't know. I will find out and I'll try to get back to you on that information. I know somebody who's building a home up in is it in Promontory, where he's going to, whatever he's doing, hydro is actually going to be paying him for the extra hydro that he's producing.
Sounds like solar panels on the roof. Yeah.
Yeah. So you probably, well, he didn't call it that though. He had another term for this home. It might be somebody you know, I don't know. But anyway, I just think there's so much information.
Oh yeah.
And I also, another thing I encourage people is look at those shows, Building Off the Grid. Because if somebody's building up in the middle of the mountain and using all kinds of new technology for insulation or whatever, it's environmentally better.
Yeah, the provincial government has, actually, I think it came from the federal government originally, but they have a 5-step code. So if you build a house to step 1, that means it's, well, sort of, at least it's got windows in it. It's your basic house and doors so that the air doesn't blast through it. Step 2 means your walls have to be at least 6 inches thick. So you have a much higher R value resistance, in other words, and your windows have to be a certain quality. Step 3 is better again, and all the way to step 5, which is about a passive house, which is you use hardly energy to heat it. If you go to somewhere like West Vancouver, there, if you have a house that has gas supplied to it, you have to have step 5. Okay. So you'll use almost no gas for heating. Right. So if you have a house that's got no gas attached to it, so you're running electricity, you can be step 3. Here in Chilliwack, you can be step 2, which means Chilliwack people, when they buy the new houses that are built here, chances are you've got yourself a house that's going to need a lot of money to heat and cool. So our city hall could easily, and I have been lobbying them, let me do it again, City Hall, if you're watching, it would not be difficult to emulate other parts of the province and just simply go to a higher step code than you absolutely have to. Now, at the end of this year, so I'm not sure whether it's the end of December or beginning of January, but something like that, the province is mandating now all communities have to go to step 3, which is great. Yeah. But doing a double jump would be so easy. Yeah. So right. It's like an electric vehicle. You might pay a little bit more upfront for a properly insulated house, but then you'll save more than that over the years. Yeah, and so, that's the whole point. When people usually people hear they're going to save money, that kind of helps. Like you said, that's right. We're run by the dollar. And as a bonus, from my perspective, you're saving yourself an awful lot of carbon dioxide emissions, which is something we desperately need. Yeah. So, yeah, for sure. I think it's great. You know, there's so many, like I said, there's so many things. So people like you are important for other people to listen to get to hear the new things, to hear what you can do. That is something we as individuals. We don't have to wait for the government to mandate this or mandate that, right? That's right. It's although it helps. So if I was to buy a new electric vehicle today, and I'm thinking of it, because we want to go down to just, my family wants to go down to just one vehicle, and that means making it electric. So we won't have the old Toyota Corolla for long range trips. So we need something that does long range. So we're looking at a 500-kilometer long range car. The government is helping because in BC, we get a $9,000 rebate on buying a new electric car.
Okay.
And I didn't include that when I compared the Volt and the
Sure.
but it's real. So, so the government can help out,
Right.
certainly. But the best way they can help out is by listening to the economists, because we know as a planet, we need to reduce the carbon dioxide that we emit.
Right.
In fact, we need to reverse it somehow, and I don't know how to do that. But we need to stop at least making it worse.
Right.
Economists are quite unified on this point. They say the best way to do it is by putting a price on carbon dioxide emissions, which the federal government calls price on pollution. The current carbon price in Canada is about 50 cents a ton for carbon dioxide, 50 cents. But our government also subsidizes fossil fuels. For example, here in Chilliwack, we saw a pipeline go raging through just a little while ago. That was going to be between 21 and between 38. I'm not sure exactly how much it's going to cost until it finishes. $1 billion paid for by the taxpayer. So that's part of the subsidy of the fossil fuel industry. Here in Chilliwack, burning fossil fuels in the valley, this is according to the Canadian Association of Physicians for the Environment, CAPE. There's 7,000 Canadians are killed every year by breathing air which is filled with the fumes coming from internal combustion engines, gas and diesel. If you scale that for Chilliwack, 20 people every year are killed in Chilliwack by the fossil fuel usage. So there's bonus. Now when you're calculating subsidies, who pays their medical care? Who pays, right? That usually, if you hurt somebody or you damage somebody, you should be the one who should be paying.
Right.
But the fossil fuel industry managed to duck that and get the taxpayer to pay. So that's another subsidy. When you add all that up, the International Monetary Fund says it's about it's $40 billion US per year, which is about 50 billion Canadian. Right. And then if you divide that by the number of tons of carbon dioxide we emit, it's getting a bit complicated, sorry about this, guys, but bear with me. Then we are subsidizing our carbon dioxide emissions to the tune of about $73 a ton.
Right.
So the carbon tax is $50 a ton. The carbon subsidy is $73 a ton. So we've got a net negative carbon tax. That's bizarre.
Yeah.
So what is a carbon? What if we had a real carbon tax, a sizable one?
Right.
Well, we can have a good idea of what it would be like by looking at Europe, because they're way ahead of us. I do remember we had a shortage of refined gasoline here over the summer because of a refinery in Washington State shut down. And when our gasoline prices were passing $1.90, I looked at what was happening in England. It was $3.20. They've always had a higher price for gasoline, a higher price for natural gas, a higher price for anything that emits carbon dioxide, i.e. a higher carbon price. Right. They emit about a third as much as we do, but have quite similar lifestyle. Right. I was quite surprised. 10 years ago, I went back to visit my old friend. Hi, Mike, if you're watching.
Mike.
You never know.
The sun is really bad now.
Okay. He had a new car, and he was driving me around, so I was back visiting Britain. And we came to a red light, and his engine conked out. I thought, oh no, the poor sod, he stole his. Can I say sod on TV?
You can say whatever you want.
Oh, good. I figured he stole his car, his brand new car, poor guy. And I
talk to the audience. I'm going to just.
I didn't want to say anything to him, so I just sort of waited patiently to see what happened. And then he put his foot on the accelerator, and the engine automatically started and went off.
Wow. So
he'd saved all the idling fumes and all the idling emissions, not to mention the cost of the gas, while the engine kept idling. And such things were not available in Canada at the time, at least I didn't hear about them, but have become common in Britain. If you make something expensive, people will avoid using it.
Yes.
It's very simple. Simple bit of but yet here in Canada, even though the economists are all agreed, the carbon tax is the way to go. And I have to give kudos to the federal government for bringing on a carbon tax, even if they've made a puny one. It's something. But we have political parties that are planning on getting rid of it, which would increase the subsidy to fossil fuels. That's especially weird in places like Ontario, Alberta, which are on the federal government tax, because 80% of the population benefit from the carbon tax. The carbon tax is collected in, it's then distributed back to the people. The bottom 80% of the population benefit. They get a bigger refund than they pay in tax. It's only the top 10% that have these massive vehicles and the private planes and everything else that will actually end up paying more. So if you get rid of the carbon tax, the bottom 80% will have more difficulty feeding their family. And
But
yet
they're
politicians are still talking about doing it.
Well, they feed
It's
them
insane.
propaganda. I'm sorry, the word is propaganda,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, absolutely. If I can suggest to your viewers something I always tell my students, do your own calculations, do the math, because you'll see how it works out.
Right, yeah. You know, one of the things too, I often think about, like, when they were talking about the pipeline, for instance, talking about, oh, bringing in jobs. And what I think is, like, why couldn't you come up with different jobs?
You can.
That where of course, right? Where you're not hurting the potential of hurting the environment so drastically, because we know oil leaks happen. They haven't figured out a way that it'll never happen. And of course, as long as human beings are doing anything, there's all the potential for mistakes, right? You know, they could have spent money finding jobs where it would then ended up more environmentally friendly items or whatever it is, projects, right?
Oh, absolutely. Here in British Columbia, like the rest of Canada, we understand that when we decrease our use of fossil fuels, what's going to happen is that we're going to need more electricity to make up for the difference. So, for example, in my house, I'm heating it by electricity now. I'm running my car with electricity. We're going to need to double or triple the generation capacity. I spoke to a politician from a party that's been pushing natural gas and fracking up north. And they said, well, why don't you just build a massive solar plant? Because solar electricity is the cheapest electricity you can get now. People used to say solar is expensive, and that used to be true. But it's not anymore. Now it's the cheapest.
Right.
So why don't you build a big solar plant like a gigawatt just north of Merritt in the desert? Is there a better place to put a solar plant?
Yes.
His response was, oh, the environmentalists would block us if we try to build there. But this government has pushed the natural gas pipeline through over the objections of the local people, especially the First Nations people.
Absolutely.
So it's bizarre what we're having to go up against. So
gosh. In a way, it's discouraging, but on the other hand, if we just take control, or like you said, do the calculations yourself. If you're watching this, it means you're on the internet. You can Google so much stuff nowadays, right, to find out. Now, sometimes you get confused. If you're like me, some of it is like, well, what am I reading? I don't know. But you need to take the time to sort things through. Like, as you wouldn't just go to the store and pay any price anybody asked, no matter what it was, no matter how it was. You would go shop around. Well, it's the same type of idea in a way. You just do a little research to see what works best for all of us. We're leaving this behind, this planet. We're not going to be here in I was going to say 20 years, but we don't know. Some of us might. Some of us might. But let's say in 50 years, we're not going to be here in 50 years. So, it would be nice to know that we're supposed to leave the place better than when we found it. Except that as human beings, we do the opposite. I shouldn't say all human beings. I shouldn't say that, because but we're invasive. We're invasive creatures, and it's all about me type of thing, which we have to get away from, and we have to be smart and think about everybody. Yeah,
and we also need to try to get along. This is a problem for the whole world. It can be solved at a global level. I know China is criticized a lot, and I'm going to sound like I'm a Chinophile, but not completely. But their leader, permanent now, it would seem. That's another story. I'm not talking about their politics. But at least he has a degree in chemical engineering. He understands climate and carbon dioxide emissions better than almost any other leader. And is it a coincidence that off the coast, I think it's Guangdong, and they have the wrong province, but it's a coastal province for sure, they're building a new wind farm, 47 gigawatts of electricity.
Wow.
Max coming from this wind farm.
Right.
British Columbia is generating about 10 gigawatts by comparison. So one wind farm just off the coast in China is going to be developing 4 times the amount of electricity that at its peak.
Yeah, for sure.
That we do in British Columbia. It's really bizarre.
It is, yeah.
And what's going to happen is it's going to make their electricity cheaper than ours, and then they're going to be able to compete on manufacturing with us much more easily.
Right.
So there's a cost run through the whole economy of continuing to use expensive fossil fuels when we should be switching to something that's far cheaper.
For sure, yeah. Well, I think we're going to end it there, because Zoom will probably cut us off soon anyway. But thank you so much for being here. I appreciate that.
Pleasure.
We'll have to have you back again. As always, it's so informative. Yes, you've been listening to Dr. Tim sorry, let me say Tim Cooper. I hope you learned something, because I sure did. The first thing I'm going to do is check a portable heat pump. That's the very first thing I'm going to do today after I finish other interviews and stuff. So anyway, thank you everybody for watching this show. And I'd like to remind you all to be nice. And finally, peace out. There we go.
A sense of community, Chilliwack's a place to be. A sense of community where you're free. Rolling through the mountains, rolling through the valley, rolling through paradise with me. It's multicultural, you're sure to see it all. Chilliwack's the place to be, you'll see. Come party in the park, go dancing after dark. Chilliwack's the place to be, you'll see.